We are finally here, and if you're hyped as I am, then share your excitement with a like on the video. Also subscribe if you're new. But in regards to this video, if you're new to the Remnant universe, or if you've been playing from the beginning, this guide will help you either way. Because in Remnant 2, there have been many changes from the original. Well, let's first state the obvious: archetypes. But that's not all. A lot has been changed or made better in Remnant 2, from how gear and weapons work to how overall combat feels based on these changes made. So this guide is to tell you how all of these relate to you as a player. Remnant in general is not your typical game. It's very dynamic, from the combat all the way to the lore. The game is amazing to say the least, and when playing, don't think of it as you beating this level then you're done. No, you can go back to an area you've already finished so that you can farm for certain materials, or if you have a specific item you're farming for. If you just enjoy the experience of fighting that enemy type in that area, that's cool too. The point is that Remnant 2 is a game that you can really dive into and spend a lot of time having fun. But enough of that. Let's get into this guide. First off, let me tell you what some of this stuff means. And if you bought the Ultimate Edition, then I'm sure right now you're enjoying the survival pack that came with it. Here's what it has. You start the game with this: 2 Mudtooth Elixir, which is an EXP bonus, 5 Blood Root, 3 ammo boxes, 1,000 scrap, and 10 iron. But ammo boxes are no longer as OP as they were. Also, Blood Root is only a 30-second heal over time, which is actually pretty good, similar to the Blood Wart from the first, but better. Scrap is your standard in-game currency, which is automatically added to your amount now when you run over it. Super convenient, by the way. You can use this to buy weapons, and with some added iron can upgrade your weapons as well. Now, of course, as you level higher and the more mods your weapons have, there'll be much more materials required to upgrade. But this will get you started, because when you first start out, you can buy, equip, and upgrade your very first weapon. So I'd say that the survival pack that comes with the Ultimate Edition is not really necessary. It's just something nice to have when you first start playing. Now, here's one aspect that was changed from Remnant from the Ashes. Before, when you selected your class, based on that, you could only choose a mod relevant to that specific class. Now you have the option to choose from multiple ones, which is very cool. This is true for the weapons as well. As long as you have the scrap to buy them, you can choose from every starting archetype's weapon. So I guess that will be useful after all. The prices vary depending on which one, but seeing all this means that there are going to be a lot of varying playstyles in Remnant 2 from the beginning. The framework was built with this in mind. Quick tip: if you're starting out playing with friends, just know that friendly fire is still very much in the game, and it gets worse as the difficulties increase. So don't get too excited when in the midst of all these enemies out there. Alright, I'm sure you know by now which archetype you want to go with. This is a new feature in Remnant 2, something that really enhances the build diversity and play experience of the game. And don't worry about being locked into one singular archetype once you've chosen, because you can switch to another one at any time. In fact, you can combine 2 archetypes together once you reach a certain level in the game. And all archetypes have what you call a prime perk. For example, the prime perk for Gunslinger is called Loaded, where when reloading after activating any Gunslinger skill will instantly reload all your weapons. This is especially great for those weapons that have insanely long reload times. You can use this as a strategy specifically for that. It'll give you a significant advantage in battle. But remember, even though you can change your primary archetype, that prime perk will go away if you do. Here's what I mean. If you decide to use the Challenger and Gunslinger combo, but the Challenger is your primary choice, you can only utilize the Challenger's prime perk, which is called Die Hard. The description states that when receiving fatal damage, the Challenger becomes invulnerable for 5 seconds and regenerates 100% of max health. But this can only be done once every 10 minutes. Which is reasonable. So when looking at some of the examples of the prime perks, I'm sure you've watched everything there is to know about them so far on YouTube. It'll be known very quickly what you prefer the most. You'll still be able to utilize many of the other skills in Gunslinger's arsenal if you decide to go with, let's say, the Challenger first. But this just gives you a foreshadowing of how deep the build mechanisms can go. By the way, if you decide to switch things up, just know that you'll have to pay for it, like when it comes to archetype traits, which also when starting out you have all of them. Let's say you choose a maxed out archetype trait which you've already leveled up. Without picking up that archetype initially, you have to spend points to be able to use that archetype trait in your new build setup once you switch. But if you've already had that archetype, have already been using it, then you won't have to spend any of the points on it. Now let's talk about the world a little bit, because this customization is very deep in Remnant 2 as opposed to its predecessor. You can now start at any biome in the game. So if you have a friend that's in the same biome as you are, it's possible they can be playing an entirely different story as you. This concept, while appealing, is still not completely random. Each biome has multiple different storylines, but not an infinite amount, so it's still consistent. But this really makes everything way more dynamic. So when it comes to this, there's not really a strategy that I can provide you with. The world is yours in this case. I will say that even though the game doesn't pigeonhole you into following the storyline exactly how they want you to, it is evident what you must do and what the main storyline is. Obviously, we have to find Clementine, but in the midst of this is when you can explore these different biomes, of course, the ones you've already unlocked. And I'd like to reiterate something I said before about upgrading your weapons with iron and scrap, also when crafting and equipping mods. When you're exploring these biomes, there will be dungeons along with bosses and mini-bosses whom you will encounter. There's also an indication at the top right corner of the map that lets you know whether you're underpowered or not based on your level. I personally have had some struggles defeating certain enemies, so in this case, don't be afraid to go back to the ward and use all that scrap and iron you've collected throughout your travels to make your weapons stronger. Then head back and dominate. Trust me, it makes a world of difference. Because once I did that and went back and destroyed the boss or bosses that I was having problems with, I was able to obtain those specified boss mods to further modify my weapons to make them even more powerful. And here's another quick tip. Mods are your best friend. They're mutators and come in clutch all the time, especially if you upgrade the cooldown trait so they'll come back even faster. Now here are some tips and strategy on how to survive in combat. Let's talk about stamina. Stamina in particular in Remnant 2 plays a huge part now because out of combat we're given infinite stamina. So subsequently, while in combat, naturally you'll think that you still have that infinite stamina, but you don't. You'll sometimes think that you got one dodge roll left, that one that'll save you, but you might not. Or just having basic mobility, stamina still plays a huge part. So stamina awareness and management are very important, which also means that stamina items will be very appealing for some who like to be more mobile than others. Quick tip, relics have changed. They've been upgraded. They're now self-sustaining inventory items of all kinds. Relics in general are meant to heal overall. So when you see a relic fragment, they are for the purposes of altering your heal in a way that suits your build. So the relics become very more versatile depending on what you get. You never have to worry about inventory management either when it comes to these. And if you happen to get a duplicate of one, it'll just be converted into dust that you can then use to get more relic fragments. So if you want to make a healer that's based on damage or survivability or support, you can do that and have the build originate from one of the many areas you can start from in your build. Let's talk about armor, how that's changed and why. Because this plays a significant part in the builds now, armor no longer comes with the set bonuses. They've been moved to another system called mutators, which are accessible on your weapons. 4 pieces of armor to complete a set now instead of 3, and their main purposes are for damage reduction, resistances, and weight class only. This way you can be more fashionable while being able to maintain the set bonuses on your weapons. Armor is also no longer upgradable. As the devs say, it is what it is. Meaning, if you get, let's say, a 25% damage reduction piece, that's what it'll be for the entirety of the playthrough. This also means that when you find a God rolled piece of armor, then you know it's something special. So you might want to hold on to that. Okay, I didn't want to make this guide too lengthy by breaking down every single archetype and why this goes well with that, etc. Because there are more than 20 different ways that you can combine these archetypes, even though there are only 5. This is mainly due to the fact that you can choose the primary archetype, which then decides which prime perk is prioritized. This brings me to my point. Of course, in any gaming community, we have solo players and those who want to go at it with a team. Depending on which way you prefer to play ultimately decides your archetype combo. Because when looking at the perks, I noticed, especially with the Hunter and Gunslinger, that both of these prime perks are exclusively for a solo player. Here's what Dead to Rights does. The Hunter's prime perk. Dealing 55 base range weak spot damage extends the duration of active Hunter skills by 3.5 seconds. You can even extend the timer beyond its initial duration. That sounds insane, to say the least, but you see what I mean. So it doesn't really make much sense to use this for your primary archetype if you plan on playing with teams for the majority of the time. Use something like the handler for your primary in order to take advantage of its prime perk called Bonded, which has the capability to consistently revive allies, granted they have their own dragon heart available. By doing this, you're free to utilize whatever else the hunter has in its arsenal. This is exactly why the build diversity in Remnant 2 will be on another level, because even the traits, after fully upgraded, can be shared across different archetypes you like to use. This is not something vital to the progression of your character either. You can always switch up when you see fit at any time, but I'm speaking in terms of efficiency and time management while playing. I personally don't like to waste time, and I don't want you to either. So I hope this guide helped you out. I wanted to provide an explanation of features that were changed so that you veterans could know how to proceed going forward. Also to provide a basic understanding of what Remnant 2 is and how to go at it as a beginner as well. I appreciate you listening to the end, and if it helped you out in any way, then be sure to like the video. Also, subscribe to my channel if you're new here. I'll catch you in the next one. Be right out.